think we can go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for coming in, and just out of respect for your time, I think we can begin. So good evening, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Trevor Pinellas. I'm the Manager of Corporate Communications with Loyalist Township, and I'm joined by Alina McElroy, the Marketing and Communications Specialist for Loyalist Township, and we'll be your host for this evening's session regarding the additional residential unit incentives. I'd like to welcome everyone for joining us here, both in person at the WJ Henderson Recreation Center, and those of us that are joining us online as well. We might have lucked out a little bit with no Blue Jays playoff game tonight, so the place is packed, so that's great. And we're really excited to have you with us this evening. So we're going to share some information regarding additional residential unit grants and how they fit within the township's affordable housing community improvement plan. And before I begin, I'll just go over a few housekeeping items with everyone just to help ensure the session runs smoothly. So for those joining us in person, in the case of an emergency, you can find the emergency exit by exiting to the right. Just head out this door here and make a right down to the last doorway on the end of the hallway, and that will take us right outside. We ask you as well just to please set your phones to silent mode if possible. And just as a reminder, to find the restrooms, if you need to during the session, you can just head out the doorway here, turn to the left, and it's your first door on the left. For our virtual attendees, I'm just going to remind everyone, for privacy's sake, we have microphones and videos turned off. If you have a question to ask, please use the chat box to submit your question throughout the presentation. And staff will be answering as many questions as possible during the Q&A portion of the presentation, which will be following the presentation portion. Afterwards, we're going to share an FAQ document as well with some of the commonly answered or commonly asked questions. So we'll share that around with everyone that attended, so you'll have access to those for anything that was asked tonight. And finally, for our virtual attendees as well, if you have any technical issues during the session, please use the chat function, and we can help you to resolve those. Finally, I'd just like to note that we're also recording the session, so it can be made available to all participants as well afterwards, and it will be posted to our project page. So if there's anything that we discuss here tonight and you want to review it, we'll have that recording available for anyone that would like to go back and take a look at it. It will be on the project page likely later this week. And so in terms of what to expect here tonight, after these introductory remarks, I'll introduce Dave Rowe-Wade, our Housing Accelerator Fund Coordinator, to discuss the ARUs, the available incentives, and the application process. And following that, as I mentioned, we'll move into a Q&A portion of the session where we'll answer your questions and comments. We've set aside the bulk of the time for that portion of the presentation. So we welcome your questions and feedback on the program. Since this is a hybrid session, our goal is to ensure that both in-person and online participants have equal opportunities to ask questions during the session. So we'll be rotating back and forth between in-person questions and online questions. And we'll just navigate that process and help direct participants through that. So with that being said, I'm just going to advance slides here. And just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement, so that we acknowledge that we are being hosted on the ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee, Mississauga, and Omamani peoples. We acknowledge and welcome the presence of all Indigenous people, including the Métis, Inuit, and other First Nations from across this vast land, who also make this place home. The lands we are on today are recognized in the two-row wampum, Fish with One Spoon Treaty, Treaty 27, and the Crawford Purchase. And at this point, I will hand the presentation over to Dave Rowe-Wade, as an Accelerator Fund Coordinator, to discuss the program.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone see the screen here in person? Everyone can see it at the back? Okay. Hopefully everyone can hear online. Please email our communications team if you cannot hear okay. So over the next 15 minutes, I'll be covering why the township has created this incentive program, what is an additional residential unit, some statistics on ARUs in Loyalist Township, and ARUs is how I'll be referring to additional residential units, so I don't have to say all those syllables every single time. And then I'll briefly address the application process to explain how you can access the available incentives. But the majority of this evening's event is to answer your questions. So a number of my colleagues are here to my right. And when we get to the question period, Trevor will introduce them and we'll do our best to answer those here live, and any of the others that we cannot, we'll make sure we get to you through other communication means. So why the township created these incentives is threefold. There's a clear, affordable, and rental housing need in Loyalist. It's part of the township's strategic plan for 2024 to 2027. And the township was awarded a federal grant under the Housing Accelerator Fund program. So I'm going to spend just a minute or two on each of these. So the current housing stock over the last several years has been largely single-family homes. Yet when we look at the population changes, pardon me, speak louder? Sure.
Yes.
As long as everybody acknowledges I'm not yelling at you. All right. So if we look at what kind of housing has been built over the last several years, largely single family homes. And yet when we look at how the populations change and how we expect it to change over the next 10, 20 years, what we have a clear need for is 1 and 2 bedroom units. So when we also look at income of households, there's a clear discrepancy or difference in people who own their homes, their household income, versus people who rent. It's pretty significant. The figures are up on the screen, but I'll read them out. $95,000 is the median household income before taxes for those who own, and $58,800 for those who rent. So there's an economic need to have more affordable rentals. Using Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation statistics, 16% of the households, so over 1,100 households in the township, fall below the affordability standard. What that affordability standard is that if you're spending more than 30% of your income on shelter, you're below that standard. And if we also include overcrowded homes or places in the state of disrepair, we're looking at almost a quarter of our township in a core housing need. So my second point of why we created these incentives is part of the council's corporate strategic plan. You can see here that the statement on the left, planning for more affordable and attainable housing, is part of the balanced growth objective within corporate strategic plan. And then thirdly, I mentioned that we had a federal grant. I think it was announced in January of this year to do a number of things around affordable housing. The goal of the overall federal program is up on the screen here. I'm not going to read each individual one. There's several initiatives that the township is doing as part of this grant. This program is one of them. Others pertain to streamlining the application development process, looking at declaration of surplus land and selling that for housing purposes, and also partnering with the county for an affordable housing complex. And I don't know if it was mentioned before, we are going to hold questions to the end rather than the middle of the presentation because, as I said, the bulk of tonight will be to answer your questions. I thought I should put this graphic up. It's called the housing continuum. When some people hear affordable housing, they have different views of what that is. So I don't know how clearly you can see this at the back or online, but you have on one side homelessness, and you get, as you move towards the right, you get emergency shelters, supportive housing, social housing, then you get into affordable rental housing, affordable home ownership, and market rental and ownership housing. What this program is focused on is on that right side, the affordable rental housing and market rental housing. We want to stimulate both, ideally more affordable, but we need rental homes. So if some are market rental housing, that's still fulfilling the need. So we're not dealing with the things on the left with this particular program. Doesn't mean it's not important, but this money, what we have here, is for the rental housing piece. So what is an ARU? Now, this is a pretty specific definition. I have some people over here. If I get it wrong, I'm in trouble. So I'm going to read it. So it's a separate and self-contained dwelling unit that is either within or attached to a principal dwelling or with an accessory building or structure on the same lot as a principal dwelling. So that for the purposes of our grant program, the ARU must be on the same property as the owner's primary residence, so where they live. And Alana, a very talented communications person, did those lovely illustrations on the bottom of the slide. So you can see 3 different examples: a basement one, an attic one that is attached to an existing building, and one that is detached, but they're all on that same lot. It's a very spatially efficient way of adding more rental units without building, say, apartment buildings. And so a number of municipalities are looking at fulfilling the need for more rental housing in this way. So some statistics about ARUs in the township. Now, first of all, some of you may have answered a survey back in May when we were developing our incentive program, and we had almost a quarter of respondents say that they would consider building an ARU in their property over the next 6 months to 2 years. Another 24% said that they would be interested in an incentive program that covered about 20% of the construction costs of that ARU. And out of the respondents that were interested, almost half of them said they would be interested in hearing more about the incentive program, which is why we are doing this event tonight. Other statistics about costs and number of permitted ARUs over the last 3.5 years. The attached or interior ARUs, they're averaging about 4 a year. There's a wide range because obviously it depends on how much space you're adding, a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom, where in your house, or if it's a separate detached building. So the attached and interior range cost went anywhere from just under $38,000 to $76,000. So an average of about $50,000 over this period of time. Detached ARUs were obviously a lot more expensive. You have 4 walls, you have a whole separate structure, much bigger range there. So let's look at costs in relation to the incentives. So the maximum incentive for an attached ARU is $12,500, but it's up to 20%. So if you had an interior ARU that cost you $50,000, you would get a $10,000 grant at 20%. If it cost you $65,000, you would get the maximum $12,500. As on this slide, detached ARUs, you get up to $25,000. There it is. Okay, so now I've matched the incentive amount, the inside attached with those drawings. So again, you can see the basement, the attic, and the attached. That's at $12,000 up to $12,500, or 20% of the construction costs, the $25,000 for the detached. The applicable geographic area for this incentive is the entire township, but you still have to meet all zoning requirements, all permitting. There's lot coverage and parking issues that have to be addressed. So those would apply. Also servicing, so whether you're on municipal water or private, there needs to be sufficient supply of drinking water and of sanitary sewer or septic on that lot. There has to be available space on the lot. That's what I was referring to, lot coverage. There's also an additional incentive for an affordable rental incentive, and I'll get to that in the next few slides. So to ensure this particular incentive meets those who are in need of rental housing. So we're talking about people who are currently don't have adequate housing or are spending more than 30%. There's a term that's used in the county and actually across the province called average market rent. So to get this incentive, you would have to be at or below that average market rent. And I will show you what that is for this year in a minute. the owners of the property would also have to commit to keeping that rental at affordable rent for a 5-year period. And this is what it was for 2025. So the county updates this every year. So there would be new figures in 2026. It comes from provincial numbers. And so this would be one of the requirements to get that incentive. But we also want to make sure it's serving those who most need the affordable rent. So there's an income, maximum threshold income component. Again, these are established by the Provincial Housing Services Act and provided to us through the county. And you can see based on different unit what the maximum household income can be. So just covering some of the eligibility issues. I'm obviously not going to be able to cover all of them. This is just some highlights. I think the first one is quite obvious. This is incentive programs for buildings built in the township or units built in the township. Grant applications have to be submitted prior to when you are issued a building permit. No grant or incentive can exceed the cost of construction. I don't expect they would be. And applicants must be in good standing with the township. So what does that mean? That you're adhering to all bylaws, you paid up your property taxes and any other financial obligations, and you're not involved in ongoing litigation. And as I mentioned, all projects, any kind of development would need to apply, be applicable to zoning bylaws, building and fire codes, other relevant legislation, and that's where we get into those parking requirements and lot coverage. So how do you access them in terms of the process? We have a few copies here of the actual, it's called the CIP Community Improvement Plan. It's available online. The URL is up there. I highly encourage you to read it so you understand some of the details. Just when you're on the website, this is what it looks like. So there's a few steps to get there. I'll put it back up. I encourage you to use that URL. So the next step for people who are interested is you arrange a pre-application meeting with township staff to discuss your project, the specifics of your site, and we will start to ask you questions that pertain to eligibility of incentives. So you would email housingcip@loyalist.ca to arrange this meeting. We can do it virtually or in person. Myself and a few of the people in this room would be in that meeting, and we would discuss the specifics before you submit the application. At that point, you will also learn if there's a planning application required for your particular project. So then you would complete and submit an online application form that's available on the website or will be in a matter of days. And then we will review the application for completeness and then eligibility. So if you're deemed eligible, you're conditionally approved, but you have to enter into a formal agreement with the township, and you must receive your building permit by December 1st, 2027. That's a condition of our grant with CMHC. In most cases, if you're applying in the next 6 to 9 months, that won't be any problem. You also must be issued an occupancy permit within 9 months of getting that building permit. So that's where when all the works are completed and you're ready to rent it out. Now, for resident homeowners participating today and online, if you apply to this and you're conditionally approved, you can actually get up to 40% of the grant at the building permit stage before you start to take on all those big construction costs. So it's just a grant request form to make that request to get that portion. You would get the remaining 60% if you meet all the conditions and you reach the occupancy stage. And I think that is it. I'll turn it back over to Trevor.
Thanks, Dave. So as Dave mentioned, we have a number of staff here tonight with expertise in various areas pertaining to the ARU, the grant program. So I'm just going to do a quick introduction. So we have Corey Grant from engineering, Stephen Mayu from building division, Jenna Campbell from corporate services, and Andrea Furness from planning and development, and Chris Feig from the building division as well. So as we move through the Q&A session, just in terms of flow, I think what we'll do is we'll open it up to both our in-person and our online audience. We're obviously eager to answer everyone's questions, and what we'll do is we'll ask everyone just to please keep your questions relevant to the topic that we're discussing tonight. We also ask everyone to remain respectful of everyone's ideas and questions throughout the process. In terms of the flow, we'll alternate between online questions and in person. So if you're here in person, and if you have a question for staff, please raise your hand. And if you're in the virtual audience, please use the chat window, and we'll get to your questions there. Any questions that are asked online, we'll be sure to repeat them back for anyone that's here in the audience, and we'll do the same thing for those that are asking in person. So yeah, so without further ado, do you want to start? Do you have a question online?
Yeah, we have one question online. So would a mobile home be permissible on a rural property to rent out? Oh, sorry. Would a mobile home be permissible on a rural property to rent out?
The answer to that would be no, because mobile homes don't meet the definition of a dwelling unit. Mobile homes
Please.
How do we find out if we can even do this? Like, we don't want to apply for a grant if we don't even know if our property's big enough, if we have blah, blah, blah to go there. Who do we contact? How we found it? Because I looked on the website and I couldn't make head or tails of it.
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you for that question. So I'm just going to repeat that back for everyone online as well. So the question was, how do we find out if we can even do this? So I'll turn that over to Dave.
Yeah, so the first step you would do is email housingcip@loyalist.ca, set up a meeting, and we'll address all those questions.
Same place as you would the grant.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's before you even submit an application, because that's one of the benefits of having that meeting for yourself to find out, is this something worth applying for? Would it pertain to what you're considering?
Well, in my instance, I would actually have to buy another piece of property that's landlocked behind me before I could probably do that. So I go there first, which is going to take time, to get it rezoned, blah, blah, blah. And is there any zoning areas where this is not allowed in Loyalist Township?
Yeah, so
the question was, are there any zoning areas in the township that this would not be allowed?
Yeah, so right now, currently, the province has overridden all of our zoning bylaws, and they allow up to 3 units on any residential property that's on municipal water and sewer right now today. So that's urban area. In the rural areas, additional residential units are not permitted today in our zoning bylaws. We do, however, we are doing something to our council next Tuesday, a zoning bylaw amendment to allow for 1 additional residential unit in the rural area, prime agricultural zones, as well as in the hamlets. And then in the urban areas, they will be permitted on any up to 4 units in total. 3 additional units could be potentially permitted, subject to meeting zoning, but you have to be on municipal water and sewer.
Yes, please, sir.
I thought I heard you earlier saying you have to have adequate water supply if you're not on municipal. Did you not say that?
Yes.
Yeah, so what does she do? You have to have municipal water.
So if you're in the rural area, when we do we're bringing a zoning bylaw amendment next Tuesday to council to allow a 2nd unit in the rural area. But you have to, as part of zoning, you have to demonstrate that you have sufficient water supply for both the 2nd unit as well as for the actual primary dwelling that's already on the property. You also, through the building permit process, have to show that the extra bedrooms would be able to be accommodated from the septic system that's on the property as well.
That's if you have them all on the house, but if you put individual homes on it, like I'm sitting on 50 acres of land, 400 foot frontage. I have a well that will probably serve 20 homes. I water all summer, 5 to 6 hours a day, 5 gallons a minute. I have water. So, but I have to do that, but I could build up to how many homes on that property?
On a rural property, then once our amendments go in, it would be one extra.
I was just wondering, said from the time the building permit is issued to the time construction takes 9 months. That seems awfully short to me, because I know I built a garage last year and it took 14 months. It's hard to get contractors to do work and be on time, and et cetera, et cetera. So can that be extended or anything?
Yeah, on a case, sorry, do you need me to repeat that?
No.
On a case-by-case basis, we could consider that. And what we're going to be looking for, are you making progress in some areas? You know, the key thing is getting that building permit by December 1st, 2027. We're just trying to make sure people are moving forward with the project and not sitting on that permit and doing nothing. So if we're seeing progress and you have a contractor that you can demonstrate you've been reaching out to and you're just not getting responded, we've all probably experienced something like that. We could probably consider extending it.
So it's not, in other words, it's not carved in stone kind of thing.
Getting the building permit by December 1st, 2027 is
Okay.
the time to occupancy permit. We would consider on a case-by-case basis.
My question is, in order to qualify for the permit, what are the dependencies in front of that? There like architectural drawings, and you guys do that? You have to hire a firm to do that?
So all that is all laid out in the Ontario Building Code. So you as a homeowner can do your own drawings. You are exempt from being registered. However, if you're not up to, provide the proper detail, if it's one in a house or a detached unit, then we would recommend reaching out to a qualified designer or an architect to take care of that. And there are minimum standards of like, the type of drawings that we would need, foundation all the way through floor plans, sections, that kind of stuff.
I live on this side of County Route 6, like on the waterfront, on Bath Road. Is that rural or is that considered a township? On the east side of County Road 6.
On
Bath Road.
North side of Bath Road.
North side of Bath Road, east side of County Road 6.
Do you have municipal water and sewer services?
We have municipal water, but we don't have septic on that part of Bath Road. We should. We all agree that we should have septic on that stretch.
For sewer, you mean like the.
Yeah, we don't have sewer.
You're on
We're
septic.
not on municipal sewer.
Yeah, there's a few areas like that. So that wouldn't meet zoning. So you have to be on full municipal services, or if you're in the like rural area, fully private services, but it's not permitted on commercial services.
The question is, am I in a rural area or am I in a? Yeah, no, it doesn't matter, but the next question was we upgrade the septic. Because you were saying that you're contemplating adding, changing the rules so that you can have an extra unit in the rural areas, right?
Yeah.
If the water and sewer qualified. So one of the things that I might suggest is part of that grant go towards upgrading a septic.
Yeah, okay, I just didn't know about the grant program itself, if there was restrictions on that anyways. I think like regardless of that though, it wouldn't comply with zoning. So, and even because that.
You're saying you want to change that.
Yeah, so we're doing that. So that's going forward to council on Tuesday with a recommendation. So, like you're welcome to submit comments. It's a public meeting at that. I can say we're generally aligning with what the province is doing. And so the province's 3 units that they're permitting is restricted to full services. there's a policy, sort of, provincial policies about, hierarchies of servicing and, most development being targeted on, like, partial servicing being not like the preferred form of, development, right?
So it would be limited to one.
Pardon?
It would be limited to one.
Right now, it would be none.
No, but that's what you suggest, so.
It would have to be rezoned.
Potentially after Tuesday, if there's an approval.
No, we're not recommending that to council. So not on partial services.
So that it's either, you either have all of it and you're good to go, or you have none of it
So either,
and
yeah,
you're only allowed one.
so either well septic or municipal water, municipal sewer, not half and half.
Oh, boy.
The distinction
Well, that's
is
not
that the zoning. So for what Andrea was speaking about for the, when you're allowed to have one, that's if you have rural zoning. But you have urban zoning
Yeah,
and partial services.
yes.
So the changes that are being contemplated on Tuesday don't
Yeah,
change things for that situation.
The issue is that like the township's official plan, which is the long range like planning document for growth, as well as like requires development in the urban areas, any sort of like extra things that we're doing, a lot of it to be on full municipal services. So there are restrictions a lot when you're on a lot that has just in urban area, because you're on septic in an urban service area.
And if we should,
You could provide comments at the council meeting on Tuesday, but from staff level, that's just not what we're recommending.
and then where's this,
So that's on, that's council Tuesday at 6 o'clock at the Odessa Council Chambers.
We just have one question here online and then we'll jump back to in person, if that's okay.
If you build an ARU on your property and receive the grants, complete the project, 1 year later you decide to sell the property, does this requirement to keep the unit rented for 15 years pass on to the new homeowner?
Yes, so, yeah, so that, you have to disclose that to the new owner, and that new owner would be then responsible for everything that you agreed to with the township. The actual agreement gets registered on the title of the property at your expense. That's how we make sure that whoever owns the property is gonna follow those rules.
Oh, do my neighbors have to approve? No, they have no say?
The only thing I would add is that if you do need a planning application, so if you needed like a zoning amendment
Yes.
or a minor variance, like let's say you wanted to do
Yep.
a detached second unit and you don't comply with the setback, so you need an application to reduce that setback, that would be a public meeting and your neighbors would get circulated for that and would be able to provide input into that process.
So good idea to get them on board before that.
Only if you need that's if you need a planning application.
Oh,
If you
yeah, we-
comply with zoning, then you could just get a building
No,
permit.
we would have to rezone it. Because my lot that I'm talking about is part of the cemetery.
Okay.
Part of the church, yeah, so, okay.
Yeah.
Any idea how long that usually takes? Like
If
6 months?
if it's a really straightforward one, then it generally like 3 months for a simple one. If it becomes more of a complicated application, it'll be longer.
Okay, so next question, if you build an ARU, does this impact your tax assessment and will increase your property taxes because you now have a potential additional home?
So the value of the building permit would be reported to impact, and that would increase your property assessment, which would increase your taxes.
I think we're caught up online, so if there are any other questions, yes, please, sir.
What's the size of the unit has to be, how large, how small? How many square feet?
In regards to what's being proposed in zoning is, it just has to be less in square footage than the main dwelling. The only thing that some other zoning regulations might restrict size, like for example, if you wanted to do a detached unit, it would have to be 50% lot coverage on the lot between the main house and the detached unit. So if you don't have a big enough lot, you can't meet 50%, then you wouldn't comply, right? So then you might have to do a smaller one, say you want to do a bigger one, but you can't meet, that's picking you up to 55% of building coverage on the lot, and then you would need something. So,
Sorry, just to add what Andrew said, there are minimum room sizes under the building code as well. So you have your minimum zoning size, that part, but you also have to factor in the minimum sizes overall, just as you design the additional unit.
And as far as driveways to that, township or the county will allow us to have a new driveway.
We're not in zoning, we're not restricting. There's requirements in zoning in regards to if you want a new driveway, how far the driveways have to be from each other. And if it's on a county road, the County of Lennox and Addington's the approval authority for entrances. So they have bylaws in regards to entrances, and so it would have to be consulted on whether you can get it.
If anyone else would have to go down a township road, so township entrance permit, which is $2,000 security deposit. And the township waiving the building fees.
Well, I think that there's exemptions for something. For development charges.
So there's exemptions when it comes to development charges. Under that, the building permit fees, no, they're still the standard fees you pay on any other building permit that you apply for in the township. Because all of ours is regulated through the Building Code Act itself, so, and our building bylaw of the township. So that would unfortunately no. But development charge wise, since we're allowing up to 4 units, or if that gets approved through council, sorry. The first unit you would pay development charges, the second and third you don't. So if your primary dwelling would have already had development charges paid for, but unit number 2 and number 3, there's no development charge on it. However, the province has indicated that the 4th unit would require a development charge on the property for in service area that's higher than
So the value of the incentive was meant to offset some of those expenses, such as permitting fees and those sorts of things.
Are there any other questions that anyone has tonight?
Question was asked about mobile homes. What about prefab? Yeah, any restrictions?
Yeah, so there's standard requirements under the building code for prefab homes. But yeah, absolutely, if it meets within the zoning and the building code requirements for the sizes, then yeah, you can use a prefab. There's just certain criteria documents that we ask for. So that we review.
Second question with the mobile homes, what's made into a permanent?
The issue there is you're running into the energy efficiency side of things, and ensuring proper insulation, heating systems, all that kind of stuff. They just don't really have the same kind of, they don't meet the minimum standards that are. Yeah, they have it.
Online, I don't think we have any other questions online. Final call for in person if there's any other questions.
Things like, does it have to have a fence around it? Is there limitations on, I know it's some places you can't have so many windows inside, you know? Is that the kind of thing that you would ask when you could do this housing CIP that has got, or is that something you guys could ask?
So are you talking about the windows, like you're doing like detached or attached,
Yeah,
the windows
separate.
down your property, like that are facing the property line?
Or, yeah,
I don't believe through zoning there's any requirements under the building code. There are, but they're more in the sense of, we call it spatial separation. Just to simplify that, is just to ensure property fire protection on neighboring properties and how far you are from your property line. There's restrictions on the size of that wall and what the opening percentage.
and fencing.
We have our fence bylaw, but there's nothing that would really dictate specifically for just follow your standard.
Do these have to have separate, we're on services, do they have to have a separate water meter, a separate hydro meter, or is it all supposed to go through the main house?
That's totally your decision.
Okay.
We can, if you do want to do a separate meter for each unit, there's the standard charges through for utilities for water meters. Hydro would be, I'd reach out to Hydro in regards to that.
Yeah.
Just to tag in, so you're aware too, they're depending on the age of the house when you're doing your permit application as well, may dictate if you need a separate heating system or you possibly could use a combined heating system. It just depends if it's 5 years or newer or 5 years or older.
I'm going to just add something. When you're considering this and you start talking to contractors, make sure they're very well versed in building things to code. Not all renovations are done to code, so that's very important because they will know these things. I neglected to say that ARUs have to have their own cooking facility, sanitary facility, bathrooms, and sleeping area. But a legitimate contractor does these all the time will know what to do. So you'll get that as part of your design services with it.
That's something that has to be shown in the drawings too.
We just had a question online that will go right to you. The example was in an attic or basement or an existing home. Does this require an actual firewall between the units?
Not a firewall specifically. There would be fire separation requirements. Again, there's differences between a newer home versus older. There's different exemptions or compliance alternatives, as we call them, to make that work. But no, you do not need a firewall specifically.
For basement apartment, under exits.
We still need 2 exits. If it's only one set of stairs going up, then a minimum of a egress window out of the basement. If it's say a walkout situation where you have a walkout door and you have a set of stairs going up, then you wouldn't need to have an egress window because you have your 2 separate means of egress.
Another online question, will there be restrictions on parking measurements of current residential townhomes?
So you have to be able to provide a 1 parking space for the additional residential unit, and that's in addition to the 2 required parking spaces that the main house would already require. So if you want to do 1, you need to have 3 parking spaces, and a parking space is basically less than 3 years.
And then just to follow up, can we cover the earlier question? I didn't quite hear the answer. If an urban home has municipal water but its own septic, is it a problem?
The zoning proposed is not set, and current provincial legislation is not set up to permit additional residential units on properties with on septic and municipal water.
It's to live in the dwelling or sorry.
So I'm just going to repeat that one back as well, just for online. So when the unit is finished, who is approving the tenant? Is it the homeowner or the municipality? That was the question.
So if you're not applying for the affordability rental incentive, your tenants are totally up to the property owner. If you are applying to the affordability rental incentive, then those maximum thresholds apply. And we would likely get the county to verify because that's what they do. They verify income for their social housing projects.
So one has nothing to do with the grant, right?
Pardon?
Those 2 don't have nothing to do with each other.
Well, there's 2 separate grants. So there's the ARU grant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you did want to get that affordability rental incentive, we would need to verify that that person is below that maximum threshold. Does that answer?
Sorry, follow up that question. Is there homeowner support for renters? If it goes to that program?
I'm not too sure, but I do know that the township doesn't.
The township could help the homeowner if you get problems.
It's water, they don't pay anymore. They 1 month and they're there forever. No.
Fortunately, it's landlord tenant or moving process for that.
Sorry, just for clarification from that previous question, with regards to the county and threshold of the income threshold, are you saying that it's up to the county to provide, not to provide, but to essentially choose the tenant, or if you have a tenant that is in that threshold and working with the county and whatnot, you can still.
Property owner is always going to choose their tenant.
Perfect.
If you want the affordable rental incentive, the
Right,
township
that's what-
just
yeah.
needs verification
Right.
that they are below a certain threshold.
Okay, but it's
The
not,
property owner always chooses their own
it's
tenant.
their choice. Excellent.
Please.
Question, I'm curious, the general questions, would you have any handouts for that?
So what we're doing is we're recording the session tonight, and we're going to provide a summary of the questions that have been asked with anyone that is participating tonight. So as a recap for anyone that's here and anyone that's participating online, we'll definitely share a bit of an FAQ document around in terms of what's been asked. So that way we can recap. We don't expect everyone to retain all the information that's been shared tonight. We will share that so you have access to that. In addition, though, we also have an email address, which is the housingcip@loyalist.ca. So if you do have any questions about the program or the grants, you can ask those questions too through the email address, and we can do our best to get the information that you need back to you as well.
So think of tonight as your first chance to ask questions, but there will be many more opportunities after the event, like Trevor just mentioned. But when you set up your pre-application meeting, it's a dedicated time for us to discuss your project. So
Is there gonna be a limit on this grant? Like you said, December 27 is cutoff date. Does that mean that's when the grant is no longer being available?
that's when the federal grant requires us having all that permitting. And at that time, depending on the success of this program, staff would maybe propose there be a continuation, but that would be at the discretion of council, because the beauty of doing this on the federal grant, it's not affecting anybody's property taxes and the municipal budget. So anything after that federal grant, we would have to consider how would we pay for the incentive program. So that's 2.5 years from now. We'll see how successful the program is.
Just to clarify, if you have questions about the incentives and the CIP program, please email the housing CIP at Loyalist. If you have specific questions about construction or building permits, you can email building@loyalist.ca. So if you have specific questions about building code or different things, then that will get to Chris and Steve and their team. I'll leave it at
We're
that.
also currently just in the process of finalizing an updated secondary, we call them secondary suites, but it's the same concept of an ARU. We have a building permit package that kind of differentiates the differences of some of the differences of requirements for less than 5 years and greater than 5 years, and things just to consider when you are talking to a designer or a contractor, just pulling out some of that basic building code information. So that'll be updated in the next little while on our website as well. Or if you email us, we can definitely provide you a copy of that package too.
Okay, so just to be clear, to figure out if I've got enough land and space and stuff, I still go to the housing one. Then I would go to the building one to find out more information.
Yeah, and if you do move forward into a pre-application meeting, as Mark's discussed, one of us from our team, be it planning, building, we'd all be in together and we'd fully just go through all your questions and look at what your proposal is, if you've got something at that time, and kind of work through the process with it.
So what is the current percentage of property that can be covered in regards to lot size? What is the current percentage of property that can be covered in regards to lot size?
That would depend on what your zone is. So lot coverage requirements are different, whether different parts of the township are some of the newer subdivisions have smaller or have larger lot coverage in their zoning than some of the older areas. In the older areas have bigger lots. So it just depends. It can vary property by property.
So who do we contact for that?
Yeah. So I mean, in general, I mean, I'm with the planning department, like anybody who has just any general zoning questions for anything on the property can always contact them at the planning commission at the township. But I'd say like as part of this grant process, like just, that main email that was just outlined, like we all are working together. So then, then you can connect with me and about building in, so you're not trying to talk to someone who's bringing me on this and that, and we'll all work together to give you that information. I can get your information after this as well, and, yeah.
Yes, please.
Do we find that, more people would be sort of doing, construction things to work and to agree with all the different regulations? Or would it be just a, privately owned home, having people come in and stay?
Are you thinking like sort of like short term? No, sorry.
But the thing is, would they be coming in, or would you have to do much work to be aligns with the regulations and the construction and whatever and everything that you would require? They just couldn't just come into the house?
No. I mean, at the end of the day, the building code, the general principle of the building code is health and safety. So life safety is paramount. So they have those requirements in there to ensure that you yourself, say if it's a basement that you're wanting to rent out,
yes,
that person in their space is safe from anything happening to yours, or vice versa, right? So that's why the building code has a lot of these, but there are leniences, I can say, in certain situations. If it's an older house, you may not need to meet higher requirements than would be in a brand new house or a house within 5 years. That's kind of the threshold on that.
But my house is over 60 years old.
So there's some compliant, we call it, as I say, compliance alternatives. So there's a little more leniencies and forgiveness in those areas for turning, I would say, your basement into like a secondary unit versus, say, somebody living in a house that they just moved into 6 months ago.
Well, I have a 1-bedroom already there, and I have like a living room, whatever, room that is 22 by 24, and a laundry room that is right across the hall from that bedroom. What more could they want?
Well, I mean, it's kitchen space.
Sorry.
Like one of these units has its own kitchen, bathroom, sleeping space, and living room. Yeah, so you have to the cooking. Yeah, so the cooking. It does.
So you would have to do construction. You'd have to put money out to make the requirements.
Possibly, it all depends on the situation. Like the building code, we have our set guidelines, but at the same time, it is situational. So if you already have something existing that's already in place, you may be able to work through the process with what you already have, and you may have not as much to do on something that you're starting from scratch. Like I'd say there's probably more to do on something starting from scratch than there is from something that's already existing or minor changes to make it compliant.
But it is talking about
creating us the kitchen and just use the kitchen.
So this is talking about creating a separate apartment unit, basically, within the existing house, as compared to renting a room in your house, which is a different thing.
Yeah. Are there any other questions from? Sure, please, sir.
This rental agreement, 5 years or 15 years?
Yeah, so if you apply for an ARU grant, you have to maintain that as a rental for 15 years.
Okay.
If you apply in addition to the affordable the affordability rental incentive, that you have to maintain that level of rent for 5 years.
And after that time, you can burn it or tear it down or get a severance, or what with the building after that time?
So no matter what,
you can rent it out for the going price of the rental.
so I
After
think there's
5 or 15 years.
So there's two separate things there. So any of the grants in this program, you have to maintain as a rental for 15 years. If you tore it down before that time, we would likely look to prorated repayment of the incentive, because the agreement is you're going to maintain it for
after the 15 years, then I can do whatever I want basically, but I can't sell, or sever, I guess. But I'd have to use it as 2 residents on 1 lot.
After 15 years, you can do whatever you want to.
Yeah, get it severed.
There's still some.
You have to apply for a consent application, a severance application, which has to meet the township policies and zoning. So there's a number of different requirements on how much lot frontage you need, how much lot area, how many times has your lot been severed in the past. So there's a number of things that would have to be looked at. So I would have to review that from a site specific. So if you're interested in the severance, I can give you after and then review your property.
So, it's 15 years if you get the grant, you have to stay with that, right? But then let's say we have a rental unit or we or rent units, do we have to still hang on with and like the low income thing, or like can we turn around and sell it within a year, like as a investment kind of sell, or?
Yes. So if you don't take advantage of the incentives that are being offered, but you still build an additional residential unit within your home, there's no requirements from the township. Once the proper building process has happened and you have, occupancy and your building permit is closed.
You'd strictly be dealing with the building permit in that case. You wouldn't have to worry about this grant process.
And it would still be the same zoning, the same type of permit you need.
Yeah.
Even if your apartment, like that lady said, is almost all done, and that like her apartment, downstairs apartment almost done, like it would be the same.
Do you have something existing? So you're talking something existing and you want to convert?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same scenario as hers, where there's no stove, no
Yeah.
kitchen, but there is like the bathroom, like they have their other facilities, because the boys have been having it, and the things that like the rent.
Yeah, so there would still be something that we have to work through on that to understand what you already have existing and to see what to cross over to meet that compliant for a secondary unit. So that permit still be the same.
And zoning would still be the same as well. You still have to meet the zoning requirements, regardless of a grant or not.
Another question online, can companies receive the same benefit, affordability, incentive, and grant, or just individuals?
For the additional residential unit grant, companies can apply, but all the same rules would apply. They cannot get the 40% advance of the building permit unless they're a nonprofit housing or affordable housing provider or an individual.
One important consideration with respect to that is that the property needs to be owner occupied in the primary unit. So if it's a company constructing something, they need to sell it to someone who's going to live in the primary unit and rent out the additional dwelling unit or units in order to be eligible.
That's a good clarification. So if a company built 12 buildings and they owned them all, didn't sell them, they can't get the ARU grant. They would have to sell each individual one of those 12. And then all the same rules would apply for that additional residential.
Let's turn to the in-person audience. Any other questions? Keep in mind that if you do have questions, as we mentioned, you can use the Housing CIP email address, and we will send that out to everyone that was registered as a participant afterwards, so you have that information. Because we know that there'll probably be some things that you might think of after you leave the session here tonight, and we're available to answer those questions. But yeah, if there's no more questions, as I said, feel free to submit your questions that way. Feel free to as well look at the affordable rental application online as well on the webpage that Dave referenced. It will be up later this week. In terms of the application form, the recording of the session, as we discussed earlier, is going to be available as well later this week online, and we'll send that in an email to all the participants who are registered here tonight. So yeah, before we go, I just want to thank everyone that joined us here, both in person and online, and for your interest in the program. It's really appreciated to hear your questions, and looking forward to discussing this with everyone a little bit further. As well, thank you to the panelists and staff that have joined us here to help answer the questions and share expertise. And yeah, so with that, we'll now close the session, both virtually and in person. And just please travel safe and enjoy the rest of your evening.